The cub lay twisted in the dirt, her ribs poking through paper-thin skin, her fur patchy and crawling with life, but not the kind that should ever live on a lion. Thousands, no millions, of parasites clung to her fragile body. She couldn't roar. She couldn't stand. She couldn't even cry. And when one man found her, buried beneath the flies and filth, what he did next would shake the soul of anyone who thought they'd seen it all. It started with a phone call. A local game ranger named Elias had been tracking poachers in the outer stretch of the Mwangi Reserve when a distressed call crackled through his two-way radio. A villager from the nearby outpost claimed they'd found a dying dog, collapsed near a drying riverbed, just barely alive, covered in bugs and twitching in the sun. But Elias knew. In this region, when someone called something a dog, they often meant something far more wild and more tragic. Elias didn't waste a second. The sun was already baking the land in a punishing wave, the air thick and still. He hopped on his motorbike, his boots already coated in dust, and sped off through the broken trails and thorny acacia groves. He'd seen injured animals before, but nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead. He found her in a shadow. The cub was curled under a single struggling shrub, half buried in her own waste, her eyes swollen shut from infection and parasitic bites. At first glance, Elias thought she was already dead. She was small, far too small for her age. Her legs were skeletal, one of them twisted at an unnatural angle. And her fur. Elias had to fight the urge to vomit. Her entire body was writhing. Fleas, ticks, maggots, parasites had made her their home. I swear she wasn't breathing, Elias would later say. She looked like something the earth had rejected. But then she twitched. Just a slight jerk of her ear. A flicker of a broken spirit still inside her. That was all Elias needed. He didn't have a stretcher. He didn't have gloves. He didn't even have the right tools. But he took off his shirt, wrapped the tiny body as best he could, and cradled her to his chest. Her skin was scalding with fever. His chest tightened. She was fading fast. Too fast. Back on the bike, Elias held her with one arm, driving recklessly with the other. Every bump in the road made her groan, a sound that was more like a whimper. A cub's roar should never sound like that. He wasn't heading to a vet. Not yet. The nearest rescue outpost was hours away. But he knew of a wildlife medic, a woman named Dr. Naya, who had once saved a leopard cub with a shattered spine. If anyone could help this little lion, it was her. When he arrived, Naya was already prepping 4 fluids in her thatched roof clinic. She took one look at the cub and went pale. "Oh no, this isn't good," she murmured. "She's covered in them," Elias said. "They're inside her ears, her nose, her mouth." Naya didn't flinch. She just nodded, rolled up her sleeves and got to work. For the next 7 hours, the two of them worked side by side, carefully shaving away matted clumps of fur, picking off clusters of engorged ticks that had burrowed deep into her skin, bathing her tiny body in a warm antiparasitic solution, over and over as her blood oozed from countless punctures. Every few minutes, the cub would cry, a soft, rasping sound that pierced the silence like a knife. But she was fighting. Somehow she still had the will to live. They named her Shani, which meant marvel in Swahili. Because truly, it was a marvel she had survived this long. The post-treatment phase was even worse. Shani began to convulse just hours after the first bath. Her small body racked by violent tremors as the parasite toxins flooded her bloodstream. Her temperature soared, then plummeted. Her breathing grew ragged. They gave her oxygen, antibiotics, vitamin drips, painkillers. Nothing seemed to help. "I don't think she's going to make it through the night," Naya whispered, her voice raw with exhaustion. "Her organs are failing." Elias didn't say a word. He sat beside the cub all night, holding a damp cloth to her head, whispering the same thing over and over. "Hold on, little one. Please hold on." Morning came. The sun rose like fire over the hills. The birds chirped. The land stirred. And Shani was still breathing. It was faint, shallow, but steady. The tremors had slowed. Her fever had dropped. Her pulse still there. She had made it through the darkest part of the storm. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was hope. Elias called in a favor with LionRescues. He'd worked with the organization once before, after a lioness had been caught in a steel snare. He knew they had the resources, the experience, the heart. When they saw the first photos of Shani, the response was immediate. A rescue transport was arranged. Donations started pouring in. Volunteers stepped up. But even so, the road ahead would be brutal. 3 days after the initial treatment, Shani developed a secondary infection. Her leg, the one bent at that awful angle, had a necrotic wound under the skin. X-rays revealed multiple fractures and a deep abscess. Surgery would be needed. Her gut was also failing. The parasites had left their mark on her intestines. She couldn't digest properly. She was wasting away before their eyes. And yet, every time Elias walked into the room, she'd lift her head just a little. Her eyes, once glued shut with pus, were beginning to open. Golden. Curious. Trusting. He knew she was fighting. Not just for her life, but for him. For the first kind human who had ever touched her with kindness. Elias barely slept. He stayed by her side, bottle-feeding her goat's milk mixed with electrolytes. He played soft music to soothe her. He whispered stories about the savannah, about the lions who roamed wild and strong. Someday that'll be you, he told her. You'll run again. You'll roar. And when Shani finally let out her first real cub-sized growl, tiny, squeaky, and full of heart, it nearly broke him. But little did Elias know, the worst was still to come. Because one parasite had survived treatment. One that had burrowed deep. One that would soon bring Shani to the edge all over again. This time with a vengeance that would terrify even the most hardened rescue vet. And Elias would be forced to make an impossible choice. One that would leave the entire rescue team in tears. Shani's fragile growl still echoed in the quiet recovery hut when Naya stepped back inside, holding a fresh syringe. She froze in the doorway, watching the tiny cub curl against Elias' chest. Her paw trembled slightly, and for the first time, her eyes had a sliver of clarity, a sliver of peace. But that sliver would be short-lived. Elias looked up. She growled, he whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make the moment vanish. I heard, Naya said softly, but her voice didn't carry the same hope. Her eyes darted to the cub's abdomen, where a swollen patch had begun to rise just beneath the skin. She knelt beside them, running her fingers gently over the area. It's getting worse, she murmured. What is it? Elias asked. Naya didn't answer right away. She pressed gently into the mass. Shani flinched and let out a soft, broken cry. The skin was taut and hot. It's a parasite, she said finally. But not just any parasite. It was Lagicolascaris minor, a rare, flesh-burrowing nematode. Most vets went their whole careers without seeing a single case. But in neglected wild cubs exposed to rotting carcasses or contaminated water, it was a death sentence more often than not. This thing doesn't just live on the body, Naya explained, her face pale. It moves through it. It chews through tissue, tunnels deep, and settles near vital organs. We missed it because it hides in the muscle. Elias clenched his fists. Can we operate? Naya hesitated. It's a risk, she said. Her body's barely hanging on. Her fever isn't gone. Her weight's dangerously low. Anesthesia might stop her heart. But if we don't try, the parasite will. There it was. The impossible choice. Try to save her now and risk killing her on the table? Or wait and let the parasite devour her from the inside out? Shani let out a soft snort and nestled closer to Elias' chest. As if she knew the battle wasn't over. They decided to try. They had to. But not recklessly. Naya reached out to LionRescue's HQ for backup. A specialist in parasitic surgery, Dr. Remy Carter, was on sabbatical in South Africa. When he saw the photos and scan results, he chartered a bush plane to come help. He arrived within 24 hours, with his own equipment and a level of calm Elias hadn't seen in days. This will be the smallest, weakest lion I've ever operated on, Dr. Remy said. But I've never seen one with eyes that determined either. The makeshift clinic transformed into a sterile field. Tables were cleared. Lights were rigged from solar panels. Every person in the room moved with quiet urgency, aware that a single slip could mean the end. Shani was sedated slowly in microdoses, while her vitals were monitored second by second. She didn't fight. She simply blinked once at Elias before slipping into unconsciousness. He squeezed her paw. I'm right here, little one. The surgery lasted 3 hours. Remy made the first incision carefully, cutting through layers of diseased tissue swollen by the worm's passage. What he found inside made even his steady hands tremble. The parasite split, he whispered to Naya. There's 2 now. One burrowed into her side, and the other's trying to reach her liver. Elias paced in the hallway, listening to every muffled update from behind the curtain. Each second dragged like an eternity. At one point, the heart monitor gave a strange spike. Naya shouted, her pressure's dropping. Remy moved fast. Clamp there, suction, no, not that one. The line flatlined. One long beep. Elias froze. His heart stopped. A tiny rhythmic pulse returned. Shani's body fought back. Even sedated, even sliced open, even poisoned, she refused to die. By the time they finished stitching her up, the room smelled like blood, iodine, and relief. The parasites were gone. Extracted. Back. Burned. But Shani? Shani was silent. Elias rushed in the second he was allowed. Her body lay limp, swaddled in gauze. A feeding tube was taped gently to her nose. Her belly rose and fell in tiny, irregular puffs. She made it, Remy said, exhaling heavily. But we're not out of the woods yet. Her immune system's in freefall. And the stress on her heart. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That night it rained. Not a gentle mist, but a wild, thundering downpour. The winds howled like spirits over the roof. Thunder cracked so loud the windows shook. And through it all, Elias sat beside Shani, feeding her one drop at a time with a tiny syringe. He sang to her softly, not knowing if she heard. "She's going to make it," he whispered. "You'll see. You'll hunt, you'll run. You'll be the queen of this land." He dozed off for just a moment. Maybe two. But when he woke, Shani was gone. Panic ripped through his chest like a blade. He bolted upright, only to find Naya crouched beside a pile of folded blankets. Shani was there, nestled in a heated sling on her lap, eyes barely open but alert. "Weak, yes, but alive," she whimpered. Naya said, "I think she was trying to find you." Elias knelt. Shani blinked at him. Then, ever so slowly, she lifted her paw and touched his knee. It was the smallest movement. But it shattered Elias completely. Tears ran down his face. "You did it," he whispered. "You're still here." The next few days became a blur of healing. Shani's body, though battered, responded to treatment. Her wounds began to close. Her weight stabilized. She even started to chew, soft goat meat mixed with formula, mashed together like baby food. Each milestone felt like a miracle. Her fever? Gone. Her vision? Clearing. Her spirit? Returning. By the end of the week, she could lift her head. The next, she took her first shaky step. And every time she saw Elias, her tail twitched. She'd press her forehead into his arm, eyes closing in something that looked a lot like trust. But not everyone believed she'd recover fully. Parasites don't just harm the body, Remy warned. They leave scars, in the muscles, in the bones, even in the brain. Shani's left hind leg dragged slightly when she walked. Her breathing was still wheezy. There was a risk of seizures or permanent immune suppression. She might never live in the wild. Elias listened to all of it, and still he smiled. "She'll write her own story," he said. "One day at a time." Then came the news. Footage of Shani's rescue, covered in parasites, half dead in the dust, had been posted to the LionRescue's channel. And the world reacted. Over 2 million views in 48 hours. Thousands of comments from around the globe. People were weeping, sending donations, making art of the cub they had never met but somehow loved deeply. "Shani is a miracle. That man saved a queen. I can't believe what she survived. I'll never forget this cub." Hope, it turned out, was contagious. Volunteers flooded in. One offered to build Shani a dedicated recovery enclosure, a soft soil area with low ramps, shaded resting spots, and enrichment toys for muscle therapy. A wildlife physiotherapist donated her time to help retrain Shani's left leg. She designed exercises, daily massages, even tiny water soaks to loosen the stiff joints. Every time Elias saw Shani try to pounce, clumsy but determined, his heart grew fuller. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was healing. But deep down he knew the wild was still far away. And her journey wasn't over. Some scars wouldn't heal. Some fights still waited. Because Shani was about to face her greatest challenge yet. Not infection. Not injury. But abandonment. A lioness had been spotted days ago, wandering alone, agitated, crying out for her missing cub. Could it be? Was Shani really alone in this world? Or had she been left behind by a mother who never wanted to let her go? And if so, what would happen when they met again? The news hit Elias like a bolt of lightning through his chest. A lioness. Alone. Agitated. Roaming the eastern border of Mwangi Reserve, growling, pacing, and calling into the night. It had been over a month since Shani's rescue. Over a month since her tiny body had been carried from death's door. And now, in a coincidence too eerie to ignore, a female lion was howling with grief in the exact region where Shani had been found. Could it be her mother? The question echoed like a drum in Elias's mind, and yet he barely dared speak it aloud. Hope, he'd learned, was a double-edged sword. It could lift you into the sky, or drop you into the pit. She could have been part of a pride, Naya said cautiously, scanning the reports from a nearby ranger. Or maybe she lost a cub to poachers. We don't know if it's connected. But what if it is? Elias pressed. What if Shani was abandoned because she was too sick to keep up? What if her mother thought she died, and now she's searching for her? Naya looked down at the little cub now dozing beside a plush log in her recovery pen, her paws twitching slightly in a dream. Her fur had begun to fill in again, the infections long cleared. She was still small, far too small, but she was no longer the living skeleton they'd first found. She's come so far, Naya murmured. I just worry, if we reunite them, what if the lioness rejects her again? The question hung heavy in the air. But Elias had already made up his mind. We have to try. They launched the search that very night. The Mwangi Reserve covered nearly 900 square kilometers of bushland, rivers, gorges, and acacia forest. It was no small task. LionRescues dispatched a drone team and camera traps, while rangers on motorbikes swept through the surrounding territory. The lioness had been spotted twice near a ridge known as Mother's Bend, so named because lionesses were often seen guiding their cubs down its sloping hill to drink. Now one paced that ridge alone. For 4 days the team tracked her movements. She was older than most, maybe 8 or 9, with a scar down her right flank and a distinct tear in her left ear. She didn't hunt. She didn't rest. She just roared. Over and over, night after night, low, guttural cries that sent chills through the reserve. A cry of mourning, of searching, of pain. And every time Elias heard those recordings, his heart twisted. Back at the rescue center, Shani had started responding strangely to sounds outside her pen. She'd stopped playing. Ears perked. Body frozen. Once, when one of the lioness's roars played on a phone near the enclosure, Shani bolted to the edge of the fence, pressed her face to the mesh and cried. Not a growl. Not a whimper. A cry. That was all the confirmation Elias needed. The next morning he and Naya began preparations for the most delicate operation yet, a potential mother-daughter reunion. It was uncharted territory. Reintroducing a wild lioness to a cub she may have thought dead? After weeks of separation and trauma? No one could guarantee what would happen. Would the lioness accept her again? Or worse, would she attack her own blood, not recognizing the fragile, parasite-ravaged version of her baby? Still, they had to try. For Shani. For the lioness. For a bond that might still be alive, beneath the wounds and the time lost. They built a transitional observation pen near Mother's Bend, half hidden in trees, camouflaged from poachers and predators, but with just enough open space for visibility. On day 1, Shani was gently transported in a padded carrier, curled beneath a blanket that still held Elias's scent. She was calm, alert, curious, and when she arrived, she sniffed the air with intensity, as if catching traces of something she couldn't quite place. That night, they placed camera traps and motion alarms. And they waited. The lioness came on the 3rd night. It was just after dusk, the air heavy with storm clouds and buzzing insects. The cameras triggered at 8:42 p.m., capturing the lioness slowly emerging from the trees, tail low, head high, sniffing the wind. And then she stopped. Froze. Because across the clearing, in a secured but open-air pen, sat Shani. Awake. Watching. The two stared at each other. No movement. No sound. Just eyes locked across a silent space. Then, Shani let out a broken yell. And the lioness responded. Not with a snarl. But with a soft, rising growl, a kind of chuffing rumble not meant to scare but to communicate. It was the sound mothers used when calling their cubs to nurse. The team held their breath. Elias was watching from a concealed distance, heart thudding like a drum. He whispered under his breath, Please remember her? The lioness stepped forward. Shani didn't move, but her tail swished back and forth, nervously, almost rhythmically. The lioness came to the edge of the observation pen, nose to the mesh. She sniffed, snorted. Then she lay down. Right there. Not pacing. Not growling. Just lying beside the pen. Shani approached. Tentative. Wobbly. Small. And slowly, so slowly, pressed her forehead against the mesh. The lioness chuffed again. And Shani purred. No one slept that night. They stayed close by, watching, documenting. The lioness didn't leave. She remained curled beside the pen all night, head occasionally lifting to nuzzle against the mesh. Shani eventually lay beside her, separated by metal but not by spirit. In the morning, Elias knelt beside the pen and whispered, She didn't forget. Naya wiped a tear from her cheek. They remember more than we give them credit for. But the hardest part was still to come, the release. After extensive veterinary checks, behavioral observations, and several more nights of peaceful interaction, the team made their decision. They would attempt a supervised reintroduction. It had to be done with care. Too fast and the lioness might lash out from confusion. Too slow, and Shani could be emotionally shattered by the continued barrier. Elias stood at the gate with his hands clenched, breathing deeply. The release door lifted. Shani stepped into the open enclosure. The lioness was waiting, already inside, tail swishing nervously. Her eyes focused on the cub. Shani froze, then ran. Not away. Toward. She stumbled over her own feet, paws clumsy, tail high, and threw herself against the lioness's chest. The lioness didn't move for a second. Then she licked her. Once. Twice. Then again. Soft, methodical grooming, like something ancient had been reawakened in her soul. And Shani collapsed into her. Elias turned away. He couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. His eyes burned. Around him, even the toughest rangers wiped tears. No one could watch that reunion and feel nothing. This wasn't just instinct. This was love. The next few weeks were critical. The lioness, now dubbed Malkia, Queen in Swahili, was monitored constantly. She accepted Shani fully, even fiercely. When other lions wandered near the territory, she growled them off with a mother's rage. She shared food, protected the cub, played with her, gently with patience, and Shani flourished. Her strength grew daily. She chased insects, rolled in the grass, and mimicked her mother's hunting postures, though she was still too young to succeed. Her dragging leg? Improved. Still noticeable but no longer holding her back. With daily exercise and soft terrain, her gait strengthened. She had purpose now. A guide. A guardian. A mother. But Elias knew the time was coming. Soon they would move deeper into the wild. Malkia would reclaim her land and Shani would follow her into the bush, into a world without fences, without medicine, without humans. He knelt one last time beside the enclosure on a golden morning. Shani looked up at him, blinking. She patted over and leaned her head into his hand. Elias swallowed hard. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. She purred once. Then turned and walked back to Malkia. That afternoon the gate was lifted. And two lions, one scarred by grief, the other scarred by survival, disappeared into the long grass together. Their silhouettes faded into the savannah like a dream. But the world would not forget. Because sometimes the smallest cubs with the loudest cries don't just survive. They roar back. 1 year later. The Mwangi Reserve bathed in golden light, the air warm and still, disturbed only by the distant hum of cicadas and the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was the dry season now, and the savannah had taken on its familiar palette of faded golds and dusty greens. The rivers had pulled back into sluggish trickles, and the watering holes shrank daily beneath the thirsty sun. But despite the harshness, something incredible was happening. Somewhere deep in the wild, a cub once left for dead was thriving. Elias stood atop a ridge, the wind tugging at his jacket as he lifted his binoculars, scanning the valley below. His heart beat a little faster each time he thought he saw movement. And then, there. Just beyond the thorn brush near the western bend of the riverbank, a flash of sandy gold. 2 lions. One large, powerful, unmistakably regal. The other smaller, quicker, with a sleek coat and a slight but steady gait. "Malkia," he whispered. "And Shani." It had been 6 months since the rescue team had last laid eyes on them. After their successful reintroduction, the mother-daughter duo had gradually moved farther away from the observation zones. Malkia had reclaimed part of her former territory, and this time she had her cub beside her. There were sightings occasionally. Ranger cameras caught their silhouettes on moonlit nights. Scavenged carcasses bore signs of lioness kills. But they remained elusive, blending into the wild as though they'd always belonged. And in truth they had. Elias lowered the binoculars and smiled to himself. They made it. Back at the LionRescue's compound, the entire team was buzzing with anticipation. Elias and Naya were finalizing a major announcement, the launch of a new initiative focused on rescuing orphaned and injured big cat cubs across East Africa. It would be called Shani's Legacy. Shani's story had reached millions. The footage of her emaciated little body fighting to live, her first trembling steps, and that tearful reunion with her mother, had gone viral worldwide. People sent letters. Children sent hand-drawn pictures of lions with hearts around them. Donations poured in. Schools across Kenya held fundraisers. Even a few celebrities shared the video with tearful captions. But for Elias, the real reward wasn't fame or funding. It was knowing that a cub no one believed would survive had done more than just survive. She had returned to the wild, and begun to lead. 2 weeks later, the team received a radio call from Ranger Amari at Station 12, deep in the central bush. He sounded winded but excited. "You need to see this," he said. Elias and Naya hopped into the rover and made the 5-hour trek into the inner reserve. The moment they arrived, Amari guided them to a cliffside lookout with a clear view of the plains. "There," he pointed. "Do you see them?" Elias brought the binoculars to his eyes, and his breath caught. 3 lions. Malkia, unmistakable. Shunny, now larger, stronger, still with that slightly uneven stride. And beside them, a cub. Tiny. Still wobbly. Just weeks old. "Oh my God," Naya whispered. "Is it hers?" Amari nodded. "We think so. She's taken the lead in the pair. Malkia is still present but more in the background. It looks like Shunny has taken over the pride." They stood in silence, overwhelmed. A lion who had once been on the brink of death, starved, infected, too weak to even stand, was now a mother. She had survived parasites, illness, abandonment. She had been healed. And now she was giving that same love to the next generation. That evening, the team lit a small fire and cooked in silence, watching the stars. Elias kept glancing toward the valley below, where shadows moved quietly through the tall grass. "I keep thinking about when we found her," he said finally. "She was so broken. It didn't feel fair, that something so small should suffer like that." Naya nodded. "But she didn't give up. She never stopped fighting. That's what made her special," Elias murmured. "She had every reason to quit, but she didn't. And because of that, her cubs might never know suffering like she did." They watched the fire crackle for a long time. "She taught me more than any textbook ever could," Elias added. "About strength. About trust. About what it means to give something a second chance." Naya smiled softly. "Maybe that's what we're really rescuing. Not just animals, but the future." Back at headquarters, preparations were underway for the annual LionRescue's Gala, a global live-stream event that would showcase the organization's most powerful stories from the year. This year, the final segment would be called "The Roar That Echoed." It would follow Shunny's journey from the moment Elias found her, emaciated and dying beneath that tree, to her full recovery, the reunion with Malkia, and now, her own cub. Elias sat down to record the voiceover for the closing message, his voice tight with emotion. "We thought we were saving her life. But the truth is, she saved ours." Shunny reminded us what resilience looks like. That the tiniest heartbeat, the faintest cry, can still hold the power to change the world. She came into our lives as a symbol of suffering, but left as a symbol of survival. And now her roar echoes across the plains. Not as a cry for help, but as a call of triumph. A week later, the live stream began. Over 4 million people tuned in. Children, families, students, rangers, doctors, politicians, celebrities, all watched, spellbound, as Shunny's story unfolded. Images of her tiny, parasite-ravaged body were juxtaposed with her now muscular frame, standing proudly beside her cub. People cried. People gasped. People cheered. And in the final moments, Elias's message played, followed by live footage from the Mwangi Reserve drone. There they were. Shunny. Malkia. The new cub. Moving as one. The family reborn. The donations shattered previous records. But more importantly, something else happened. Hope spread. People began asking what they could do. Not just for lions, but for all animals. Letters poured in from wildlife groups across the globe, asking for collaboration, training, advice. Dozens of rescue organizations adopted the Shunny protocol, a step-by-step process LionRescues had developed based on her case, to handle fragile cub rescues with maximum care and minimal stress. And for the first time, governments began talking about real funding for large-scale parasite treatment programs and reserves. Because if millions of parasites could bring a lion cub to the brink of death, they could do the same to hundreds more. But even in all the noise, all the global celebration, Elias still found himself remembering the quiet moments. The feel of Shunny's small body leaning into him that first night. The terrified look in her eyes as he first lifted her from the mud. The soft, raspy purr as she pressed her head against her mother's chest. And now, the sight of her, standing strong in the wild, her own cub trailing behind her like a shadow. He had always believed in second chances. But Shunny? She made him believe in miracles. If this story moved you, if Shunny's fight for life touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Thousands of wild cubs just like her are still out there, suffering in silence, waiting for someone to care. With your support, LionRescues can give them a chance. A chance to heal. A chance to grow. A chance to roar again. Subscribe to Lion Shield today. Click the bell so you never miss a rescue that could change everything. Donate if you can. And share Shunny's story, because hope grows louder when it's heard. From all of us here at Lion Shield, thank you for helping us turn cries into courage. And remember, even the smallest roar can echo forever.